Hello and welcome. In this session, we will explore how to configure and manage a Microsoft Entra tenant, specifically focusing on when and how to recommend administrative units to delegate permissions and secure your environment. Let's get started. To begin, we must define the scope of our management, the Microsoft Entra tenant. Think of a tenant as a secure, isolated container for your organization's digital assets. Within this boundary, you manage objects like users, groups, and devices, as well as the policies that govern them. Depending on your needs, you might configure a workforce tenant for your internal employees and business apps, or an external tenant if you are publishing apps to consumers or partners. Regardless of the type, the tenant acts as the primary identity and access management scope. Typically, the person who creates the tenant becomes the global administrator. This role holds immense power, managing all administrative features. However, relying solely on global admins for every task is a security risk and an operational bottleneck. This is where delegating administration becomes critical. This diagram illustrates the Microsoft Entra tenant as the central boundary. Inside, we have core resources, users, applications, and policies. At the top, overseeing everything, is the global administrator. While the global admin has a direct line of management to the entire tenant, our goal today is to learn how to break this monolithic management model into safer, more manageable pieces using administrative units. Now, let's introduce the core concept for delegation, the administrative unit, or O. An O is essentially a container within your tenant that holds specific users, groups, or devices. The primary purpose of an O is to restrict administrative scope. Instead of giving an administrator power over the entire tenant, you assign them a role like user administrator or help desk administrator scoped strictly to an O. This ensures they can only manage the objects inside that specific container. It is important to note flexibility here. A single resource, such as a user, can be a member of multiple O. For example, a user could belong to a marketing O and a Seattle O, allowing different local admins to manage them based on different criteria. This structure allows you to subdivide your organization logically without creating separate tenants. Here we see the tenant split into two administrative units, sales and engineering. Alice is placed in the sales O, and Bob in engineering. We then take a help desk admin role and assign it specifically to the sales O. This link means the help desk admin can reset Alice's password but has no authority over Bob in engineering. This visualizes exactly how permissions are constrained to the container. When should you recommend using administrative units? They are most beneficial for organizations comprised of independent divisions. A classic example is a large university with autonomous schools, like a school of business and a school of engineering. Each school often requires its own IT staff to control access and manage users independently of the others. Similarly, multinational corporations should use O to empower regional IT teams. If you have a support team in Europe, you can create a Europe-O. By assigning the password administrator role scope to that O, the European team can reset passwords for local employees without having access to US accounts. Essentially, whenever you need to delegate high-privileged tasks like user or group management without granting tenant-wide access, administrative units are the correct architectural choice. This flowchart helps you decide when to use an O. First, ask if delegation is needed. If the management need is not tenant-wide but specific to a region or division, the path leads directly to recommending an administrative unit. From there, the process involves creating the O, populating it, and finally assigning the scoped role. This logic ensures you adhere to the principle of least privilege. A critical advanced scenario involves restricted management administrative units. Standard O allow tenant-level admins to retain control, but sometimes you need to block even them. Restricted management O are designed to protect highly sensitive objects, such as the CEO's user account or sensitive finance security groups. By placing executive accounts into a restricted O, you prevent a standard tenant-level help desk administrator from resetting the CEO's password to gain unauthorized access. In this configuration, tenant-level roles, even global administrators, are blocked from modifying the members of this specific unit. Only administrators you explicitly assign to the scope of this restricted O can manage these sensitive objects. This creates a highly secure enclave within your tenant. The diagram highlights the security boundary of a restricted management O. Notice the tenant-level admin on the left. They have a solid line allowing access to the standard O, but a dotted line indicating blocked access to the restricted O containing the executive account. Access is only granted to the scoped admin on the right, who has been explicitly assigned to that restricted unit. This visualizes the lockout protection mechanism. Configuring administrative units is straightforward. You can create them using the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, PowerShell, or Microsoft Graph. Once created, you must populate them. You can add users, groups, or devices manually, or for efficiency, use dynamic membership rules. For example, you can create a rule that automatically adds any user with the department attribute set to sales into the sales O. Be aware that using dynamic membership rules requires a Microsoft Entra ID P1 license for each member covered by the rule. After population, the final step is role assignment. You navigate to the O in the Admin Center, select Roles and Administrators, and assign a role like User Administrator. This applies the permissions strictly to the scope of that unit. This sequence diagram details the configuration lifecycle. First, the admin creates the unit in Entra ID. Next, they add members either statically or via dynamic rules. Finally, the crucial step, assigning a role scoped specifically to that O. The note emphasizes the result. The assigned role's power is now confined strictly to the members of that O, completing the secure delegation setup. To use administrative units effectively, you must understand their constraints. First, unlike Active Directory organizational units, Entra administrative units cannot be nested. They are a flat structure. Second, a common pitfall, adding a group to an O brings the group object itself into scope, but not the members of that group. If you need to manage the users, those users must be added directly to the O. Regarding licensing, you typically need a P1 license for the administrators, while members can use free licenses, unless you use dynamic membership rules, which trigger P1 requirements for members. Finally, distinguish between O and groups. Use O to define who can manage a set of users. Use security groups to define what resources those users can access. This diagram contrasts administrative units with security groups. The left branch shows that O are for defining admin scope, while the right branch shows security groups are for granting resource access. The dashed lines warns of two key constraints for O. They must be flat, no nesting, and adding a group to an O does not automatically include that group's members in the management scope. In summary, configuring a Microsoft Entra tenant for security involves strategic delegation. The tenant is your perimeter, but administrative units are your internal walls. We recommend using administrative units whenever you need to delegate permissions based on geography, department, or business unit. They allow you to uphold the principle of least privilege by ensuring admins only control what they need to. Remember to leverage restricted management O for your most sensitive accounts to prevent unauthorized access from broad admin roles. By combining these tools with dynamic membership rules, you can build a robust, scalable, and secure management model for your organization. Our final mind map recaps the session. At the center is Entra tenant management. Branching out, we have delegation via administrative units for geographies and departments. We have security, highlighting restricted management O for executive protection. Configuration covers dynamic rules and scoped roles. And finally, we note the constraints like no nesting and licensing needs. This map serves as your quick reference guide for implementing O.